The great crystal throne hall of the Zyrian Empire glowed like a living sun. The floor was made of shining silver glass, and the tall pillars rose into endless heights, filled with strange symbols that whispered power. Thousands of alien nobles stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the center where a single human stood. His name was Captain Ethan Cole, once a soldier of the Terran Vanguard, now a prisoner of the galaxy's most feared ruler, the Alien Empress Serelith. Her throne floated above the ground, made of light and crystal wings. Her mask of silver covered her face, and her long dark robes moved like liquid shadows. The chamber was filled with fear, because no one, not even the most powerful admiral, dared to speak before the Empress without bowing. But this human stood tall, hands bound, his uniform torn, his eyes steady. And when the Empress spoke, her voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "You are charged with defiance against the crown." Her words were calm, yet heavy enough to make the marble tremble. Ethan lifted his head. He looked straight at her glowing eyes behind the mask, and said in a voice that carried across the hall, "I defied your command because it was wrong. You ordered the destruction of an innocent colony, and I would rather be executed than obey such an order." The hall gasped. The aliens stepped back as if struck by lightning. No one had ever spoken to the Empress like that. A guard slammed his staff to the floor and shouted, "Silence, human. You speak before the eternal flame of the galaxy." But Ethan didn't move. His jaw was set, and his gaze never left her face. "Eternal flame or not," he said slowly, "truth does not bow." The words fell like fire, and even the Empress leaned forward on her throne, the mask hiding her expression but not her curiosity. For the first time in years, someone had dared to challenge her, not with weapons, but with words. The Empress rose. The hall darkened as her power filled the air, shimmering like waves of heat. She walked down the steps, each one echoing with silence, until she stood just a few feet from the human. The guards trembled, waiting for her to give the order to end him, but she didn't. Instead, she asked softly, "Do you fear death, human?" Ethan shook his head, his voice steady. "I fear losing what makes us human, not death." Something in her eyes changed. A flicker of light. A spark of something that no one in the galaxy had seen before. A smile. Small and silent, but real. The nobles froze, unsure if what they saw was real. The Empress of the Zyrians, smiling at a human defiant before her. The moment stretched like eternity. Then she turned and spoke to her council. "Remove his chains." Gasps filled the hall. The guards hesitated, thinking they had misheard. "Did you not hear me?" Her voice grew colder. "Remove them." The chains fell away, and Ethan rubbed his wrists, still staring at her. She stepped closer and whispered, only loud enough for him to hear, "You are either the bravest fool I have ever seen, or the most dangerous man in this galaxy." Ethan replied quietly, "Maybe both." Her smile widened, just a little. The guards looked at one another in fear. The advisors whispered that the Empress had lost her mind, but she ignored them. She turned back to the throne and spoke with a voice that carried command and mystery. "Captain Ethan Cole will not be executed. He will be studied." The hall erupted with confusion, but no one dared to protest, as the guards led Ethan away, not toward the execution chambers but toward the royal quarters. He could feel her gaze following him. Her eyes glowed with something strange, something new. The rumors began spreading across the empire within hours. The human who spoke against two. He Crown, the one who made the Empress smile, the one who lived when no one else dared to speak. And far above the capital, the stars themselves seemed to burn brighter that night, as if the universe had just witnessed the beginning of something it could not yet understand, because deep inside her crystal throne, the Empress sat in silence, her silver mask on the table beside her, and in the reflection of the glass window, she whispered his name for the first time. "Ethan Cole." Her lips curved again into that quiet, dangerous smile. "The human who defied me." The air inside the celestial fortress was cold and silent. The walls shimmered with faint blue light, and the sound of distant engines hummed through the metallic corridors. Captain Ethan Cole sat on a bed made of polished crystal, staring at the stars through a narrow window. He had been brought here after the trial, not as a condemned man, but as a mystery the galaxy could not explain. He should have been executed within the hour, But instead, he found himself in a private chamber overlooking the Zyrian capital world. His chains were gone. The guards did not speak, and the food they brought him was fit for royalty. It made no sense. Every day he wondered why she had spared him, why the alien Empress Seralith had smiled at him like that. No ruler of her kind had ever shown such emotion. No being in the Empire dared to even meet her eyes, yet she had smiled at a human rebel. When he closed his eyes, he could still see her face, the silver mask, the eyes that burned like twin stars, and that strange, almost human smile that had sent shivers through the hall. On the third night, something changed. The guards outside his cell stiffened as the air shimmered. A soft light filled the room, and from the center of it, a figure began to appear. It was her. The Empress stood before him, not in armor, not on her throne, but in a flowing gown of white light, her face uncovered, her hair like black fire floating. G around her shoulders, her eyes deep and endless. Ethan rose from the bed, stunned. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, but she raised a hand, silencing him. "No titles here, Captain," she said, her voice calm yet carrying a force that made the air tremble. "I did not come as your judge, I came as your question." He frowned, not understanding. "Your question?" She nodded slowly, taking a step closer. "You stood against me when every creature in my empire bows in fear. You refused the crown and still you live. I have ruled for centuries, seen empires rise and fall, yet no one has ever spoken truth to me without trembling. So I must ask, what are you?" Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet but firm. "Just human." She smiled again, the same small, dangerous smile. "No, you are not just human. I have seen humans beg. I have seen humans break. But I have never seen one look into my eyes and speak with such fire." He met her gaze, unflinching. Maybe that's what being human means. To burn, even in the dark. The words hung in the air, heavy and honest, and for the first time in her long reign, the Empress felt something she could not name. Curiosity mixed with warmth, confusion mixed with fascination. She walked slowly around him, her movements graceful like flowing water, her eyes studying him like a scientist studying a rare star. "You are fragile," she said. "Your bones weaker, your skin softer, your mind limited. Yet your heart—" She paused, placing a hand near his chest without touching him. "It burns like a sun that refuses to die." Ethan didn't move. He could feel the heat from her aura, and behind her words he heard something she was hiding, a loneliness deeper than any throne could fill. "Why do you care?" he asked softly. "Why am I still alive?" She turned her gaze toward the window, where stars glowed like frozen fire. "Because, Captain," she said, "Yai, you reminded me of something I thought was lost long ago, before I became a crown." For a moment, the mighty Empress looked almost human. Her voice carried the weight of centuries, and Ethan saw not a ruler, but a soul trapped in light and duty. Then she looked back at him, the power in her returning like a storm. "Tomorrow you will dine with me," she said, "and you will tell me about your Earth, your wars, your courage, your pain, everything." He blinked in disbelief. "Dine with you? You mean the Empress of the Zyrian Empire wants to have dinner with a prisoner?" Her eyes glowed brighter. "You are not a prisoner, Captain. Not anymore. You are a lesson I must understand." With that, the light around her grew stronger. Her image began to fade. But before vanishing completely, she looked at him one last time, her voice soft as starlight. "Do not fear the crown, human. Sometimes even the brightest star envies the warmth of a smaller flame." And she was gone, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of alien flowers. Ethan stood still for a long time, his hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the strange pull he felt inside, a sense that his life had just crossed into something far larger than any human could imagine. Outside the fortress, far beyond the glowing city, the royal ship Seraph's light hovered silently above the clouds, and inside its grand chamber, the Empress sat alone, staring at the reflection of her own smile, the one that refused to fade. Across the galaxy, Whispers began to spread, from soldiers to senators, from slaves to rulers. The human lives, and the Empress watches him. And in the dark corners of space, unseen forces began to stir, for every empire knows, when a ruler begins to feel, the universe begins to change. The next morning, the celestial fortress was alive with whispers. Every guard, every servant, every drone knew that the impossible had happened. The human prisoner had been summoned to dine. With the Empress herself, such an honor had never been given to anyone outside her royal blood, not even her highest general. Captain Ethan Cole stood before a mirror, wearing clean clothes made from soft Zyrian fabric, glowing faintly like starlight. He looked at himself and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. His reflection looked calm, but inside, his heart raced. He had faced death before, but this felt different. This felt like stepping into something unknown. When the door opened, 2 royal guards entered, tall beings with crystal armor that shimmered with every step. One of them bowed and said, "The Empress awaits you, human." His voice respectful, almost nervous. They led him through endless corridors made of glass and gold, the walls alive with flowing energy, the silence heavy but filled with unseen eyes. Ethan could feel them watching, advisors, spies, scholars, all curious about the strange human who had defied their ruler and somehow lived. At last, the great gates opened, and he stepped into a place unlike anything he had ever seen. The Stellar Garden. It was a world within a palace. Trees floated in the air with glowing leaves, rivers of light flowed in slow motion, and creatures made of pure energy fluttered between silver flowers. The air was warm and alive, filled with the soft hum of life itself. At the center of this beauty sat the Empress Serelith, not on her throne, but on a simple chair beside a floating table. Her silver mask was gone, and her long dark hair fell freely across her shoulders. She looked less like a ruler and more like a being lost in thought. When Ethan entered, she turned her head slowly, and for a moment her gaze softened. "You came," she said quietly, her voice smooth like silk. He bowed slightly, unsure what was expected of him. "You asked, I answered," he said, trying to sound calm, though his pulse betray him. She gestured for him to sit across from her. The table between them was made of living crystal, and on it, dishes from dozens of worlds shimmered. Some looked familiar, others impossible. "You humans," she said, watching him. "You build worlds out of dust, fight wars with nothing but hope, and when the universe tells you to kneel, you stand taller. Why?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because we have learned that once you kneel to fear, you never stand again." The Empress tilted her head, eyes thoughtful. "And yet, your kind is fragile. Your lives are short, your power small. What makes you believe you can stand against eternity?" He looked at her, his voice calm. "Because eternity without freedom is just another prison." For a long moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on him, as if his words had broken something inside her. A silence followed, not cold, but filled with emotion she couldn't hide. "On my world," she said finally, "truth is dangerous. Words can kill, yet you speak as if your tongue fears no consequence." Ethan leaned back slightly. "Maybe that's why you invited me here," he said. "Not to study me, but to remember what it feels like to be free." The Empress's hand froze halfway to her glass, her eyes widened slightly, then a small smile curved her lips again, that same rare smile that had begun haunting her nights. "You are reckless," she whispered, "and blind to danger. Or maybe," Ethan said softly, "I'm just tired of seeing fear wear a crown." The light around her flickered, not from anger, but from something deeper, something close to admiration. Her heart, if she still had one, felt alive again for the first time in centuries. She stood slowly, walking toward the edge of the floating garden, where the stars shimmered like fireflies in the distance. "Do you know what it means to rule, human?" she asked, her voice almost sad. "It means becoming something less than alive. It means wearing a smile you do not feel, speaking words you do not believe, watching eternity move while you stand still." Ethan joined her side, looking at the stars. "Maybe that's why I never wanted to rule anything," he said. "Because the moment you stop feeling, you stop living." The Empress turned her head slightly. Her face close to his, the air between them warm and electric. She whispered, "You speak as if you understand me." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I do." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the galaxy felt quiet, like even the stars were listening. But then a sudden sound shattered the calm, a mechanical tone, urgent, sharp, the voice of a royal aide echoing through the chamber. "My Empress, forgive the intrusion, but the High Council demands your presence. They are alarmed by your guest." The Empress's gaze turned cold again, though not at Ethan, but at the world beyond. "Let them wait," she said, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. "For once, the galaxy can wait." She turned to Ethan, her tone softer. "Tomorrow, you will come again. There is more I wish to understand about your Earth, your people, and your heart." Ethan nodded, though inside he felt the strange pull grow stronger. This was no longer a meeting between a ruler and a prisoner. It was something else, something neither of them could name. As the guards escorted him back through the corridors, whispers followed him once more, but this time they carried a tone of fear and awe. The human dined with the Empress. She smiled again. "The crown is changing." And far above the palace, in the deep black of space, unseen eyes watched from hidden ships, unseen powers whispering to each other. If the Empress changes, the galaxy will burn. But in that moment, none of that mattered, because deep in her private chamber, the Empress stood alone before the window, her hand resting over her heart, and she whispered to the stars, "Why does one human make me feel alive?" And beyond the walls of her empire, the universe itself seemed to listen. The vast chamber of the Galactic Council burned with light. Thousands of alien senators filled the towering hall, their eyes shining with colors not found in any human world. The air trembled with tension. Today, the galaxy itself would judge the Empress. In the center stood the throne of reason, where the Empress Serelith sat, calm and silent, her silver mask once again covering her face. Beside her, in a circle of energy chains that glowed like fire, stood Captain Ethan Cole, the only human in the room. Across the hall, 1,000 alien voices hissed, "He is dangerous. He defies the crown. He corrupts our ruler." Their anger echoed like thunder. The council high speaker, a tall being of molten glass, raised his staff and declared, "The Empress has broken the law of the Eternal Empire. She protected a defiant creature, a human who dared to speak against the crown." Serelith's eyes glowed behind her mask. "He spoke truth," she said quietly, "and truth is not treason." The chamber erupted, hundreds of voices screaming in outrage, the sound like a storm, but the Empress did not flinch. Her gaze remained calm, her power silent but immense. The speaker slammed his staff again. "You have ruled with wisdom for centuries, Empress, but mercy to a lesser species endangers us all. Your compassion weakens the throne." Ethan looked around, his jaw tight. He had seen battlefields and death, but this was different. This was a trial of existence, a galaxy deciding whether his kind deserved to breathe. The Empress turned her head toward him, her voice calm. "Speak, human." Ethan blinked. "You want me to speak here? Before them?" Her lips curved faintly under the mask. "You defied me before the throne of my empire, Captain. Surely you can do the same before my council." He stepped forward, the energy field sparking around him, but he ignored the pain. "You call me lesser?" "Mad," he said, his voice strong and clear. "But look around you. Your empire is built on fear. Every creature here obeys because they are terrified of power, not because they respect it." The chamber fell silent. 1,000 eyes turned toward him, some in shock, some in fury. He continued, "On Earth, we learned something long ago. Power without heart is just another name for slavery." The speaker roared, "Silence, human!" But the Empress raised her hand, stopping him, her gaze locked on Ethan, and through that silver mask, she felt something she could not describe. Pride, perhaps, or awe. Ethan went on, "You think mercy is weakness, but it takes more strength to forgive than to destroy. And maybe that's what your Empress has remembered. The hall trembled with whispers, words spreading like sparks through dry air, and for the first time in centuries, doubt entered the minds of the powerful. The speaker turned to Sarilith, his tone sharp. "You see, Empress, he poisons even your thoughts. End this madness, end the human." But Sarilith rose from her throne, her long cloak sweeping across the floor like a wave of shadow. The hall dimmed as her aura expanded, filling the chamber with silver light. "Enough," she said, her voice echoing like the voice of the stars themselves. "I have listened to this council for 1,000 years, and never have I heard such fear disguised as wisdom." The senators fell silent. Even the speaker stepped back, the Empress's presence overwhelming. "This human," she continued, "has spoken truths that none of you dared to speak. He reminded me that strength is not found in silence but in courage, and I will not punish him for showing me what it means to live again." Ethan watched her, stunned, as her power flared brighter, her mask glowing with silver flame. "If the council demands his death," she said, "then you may have mine as well, Tao." The entire hall froze, every senator turned pale. No one had ever heard such words from her. "You would fall for a human?" the speaker hissed. "You would burn your own empire." Her voice thundered. "If mercy burns my empire, then perhaps it deserves to burn." Gasps filled the air, and the sound rippled across the galaxy through 1,000 recording drones. The council chamber was silent now. No one dared to breathe. Finally, the speaker lowered his staff, his voice trembling. "So be it. The human shall live. But the blood that follows will be on your hands, Empress." She turned her gaze to Ethan, her eyes soft now, the light around her fading. "So be it," she whispered. "Let it begin." That night, across the Empire, planets stirred in confusion, soldiers whispered in secret, nobles gathered in fear, and the people spoke her name with awe and terror. The Empress defied the council. She stood for a human. The crown bleeds for Earth. But in the quiet of the celestial fortress where Ethan was returned under light guard, he stood before his window again, staring at the stars, his heart heavy with what he had seen. He knew what her words meant, what she had risked. He whispered softly, "You didn't just save me. You changed everything." Far above him in her private chamber, the Empress sat alone, the mask removed, her reflection trembling in the glass, her hand brushing over her chest where her heart once felt cold, now warm again. She whispered into the silence, "He defied me once. Now I defy the galaxy." And as her words drifted into the void, the stars outside seemed to pulse brighter, as if the universe itself had taken a deep breath, preparing for what was coming next, because when a ruler challenges her own crown for a human, the galaxy will never stay the same. The galaxy had gone silent before the storm. The light of distant stars dimmed behind dark war clouds, fleets moved in shadows, and the air across the worlds of the Zyrian Empire grew thick with fear. The council had been humiliated. The Empress had defied their will for a human, and now, enemies who had waited in darkness began to rise. At the edge of the galaxy, the Vorn Dominion stirred, a ruthless empire of war machines and fire. They saw weakness in Sarilith's compassion, and within weeks they declared war, their message simple and merciless. A ruler who smiles is a ruler ready to fall. In the capital, the skies filled with ships, silver, black and gold, thousands of vessels rising like flocks of metallic birds. The Empire was preparing for its greatest war in centuries, but this time it was divided. Some stood with the Empress, others plotted to replace her. Inside the command hall, the Empress stood at the great galactic map, lines of blue light forming the shape of the coming war. Beside her stood Captain Ethan Cole, wearing a dark Zyrian coat marked with the insignia of her personal guard, a position no human had ever held before. Her generals whispered in anger, "He has no place here. He is not one of us." But Sarilith silenced them with a look, her voice calm yet unshakable. "He is here because he sees what you cannot. He knows how to fight not as a machine, but as a soul." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes scanning the holographic map. "The Vorn think you'll meet them head on," he said. "That's what they expect, but humans don't fight the way empires do. We fight from the shadows, from hope, from what others think impossible." The room went quiet. Even the generals stopped whispering. The Empress tilted her head. "Then tell me, Captain, How would humans fight a war they cannot win? Ethan looked at her, his voice steady. We don't fight to win. We fight so the enemy remembers us forever. For a long moment, Sarilith said nothing, then a small smile curved her lips. Then let the galaxy remember. Days turned to weeks, fleets launched from every moon, the stars burned with the trails of engines and tea. The first battles began, the War of the Silent Stars. The Empress commanded the royal ship Seraph's Light, a vessel of beauty and destruction, surrounded by glowing rings of power, and Ethan led a joint squadron of humans and aliens, his ship named the Starbreaker, a Terran design rebuilt with Zyrian technology, a symbol of two worlds fighting as one. The first clash came at the Dravon Belt, a region of broken planets and drifting wreckage. The Vorn Armada waited like predators in the dark, their ships silent until the first Zyrian cruiser entered range. Then the void exploded with light. Lasers, plasma, and radiation storms filled the stars. Entire ships shattered into dust. Communication failed. Chaos ruled. And yet through it all, Ethan's voice cut through the storm. Calm, sharp, human. Hold formation. Trust your heart, not your sensors. The alien pilots followed his voice, his courage spreading through the fleet like wildfire. On the bridge of the Seraph's Light, the Empress listened to his commands, her eyes glowing brighter, pride and fear fighting in her chest. When his squadron was surrounded, she rose from her throne and shouted to her crew, "All power to forward shields, open the path for the human." The royal ship roared into the battlefield, its light slicing through the darkness, and for a moment, even the enemy hesitated. The Empress's voice thundered through the comms, "He fights for life, follow him." Hours passed like centuries, explosions painted the stars red, and at last, the enemy flagship appeared, massive and burning with black fire, its cannons locked onto the Seraph's Light. Ethan saw it first, his scanners flaring with danger. "They're targeting you," he shouted. "You have to fall back." But her voice came through, calm and soft. "A ruler who hides cannot lead." Before he could reply, the Vorn flagship fired, a storm of energy tearing through the Empress's ship. Alarms screamed. Flames filled the hall, and for the first time the galaxy saw its Empress stumble. Without hesitation, Ethan turned the Starbreaker toward the heart of the enemy. "Lock all missiles, prepare to ram," he ordered, his crew shouting in disbelief. A young Zyrian pilot cried out, "You'll die, Captain." Ethan smiled. "Then I'll die doing what humans do best, protecting what we believe in." He accelerated, the ship tearing through waves of fire, smashing into the Vorn carrier, explosions lighting the void. The shockwave broke the enemy line, and the rest of the fleet charged, their cries echoing through the comms. For the Empress, for the human. The battle ended in victory, but the price was heavy. The Starbreaker was gone, debris drifting through the stars, the Empress's ship damaged but alive. She stood on the bridge, her face pale, her eyes locked on the drifting wreckage. "Ethan," she whispered. "You fool, you shining fool." Her officers bowed their heads in silence. None dared speak. None dared look at her tears. But hours later, when the fires were gone, a signal flickered across the void, faint and broken. "Seraph's Light. This is Starbreaker Survivor Pod 7. Requesting pickup." Her heart skipped. She turned sharply. "Trace it, now." When they found him, his escape pod cracked and frozen. She personally went to retrieve him. When the hatch opened, Ethan was half-conscious, whispering her name. She knelt beside him, her hand trembling, her voice soft as starlight. "You live?" He smiled weakly. "Told you humans don't die easy." Her lips curved, and though her empire burned, though war raged on every border, in that moment she felt something she had never felt before. Peace. Outside, the wreckage drifted through the silent stars, glowing with the light of victory and sacrifice, and the legend began to spread across every world. A human led the Emma. Press to victory. The War of the Silent Stars was won by courage, not power. The Empress smiles again. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, unseen powers whispered. The human changed her heart, and now the galaxy will change forever. The war was won, but victory brought no peace. The palaces of the Zyrian Empire stood under strange silence. The council halls that once echoed with cheers now whispered of fear, and the name of the human, Ethan Cole, was spoken like a myth and a warning. In the great hall of the Empress, where silver banners hung like frozen light, Serelith sat alone on her throne, her mask lying beside her, her eyes dark with thought. The stars outside glowed softly through the crystal windows. But inside her heart, a storm was brewing. Ethan entered quietly, his arms still bandaged from battle, his steps echoing in the emptiness. She looked up, and for a moment the weight of an empire seemed to lift from her shoulders. "You should rest, Captain," she said, her voice soft. "I can't," he answered, smiling faintly. "Not when I see you sitting here like the war never ended." She sighed, her gaze falling to the floor. "I won a war, Ethan, but I may lose my throne." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "The council moves against me," she whispered. "They say I am no longer fit to rule, that my heart is poisoned by a human's weakness." Ethan walked closer until he stood just below her throne, his eyes meeting hers. "Then let them come. If they want to see weakness, they can look me in the eye first." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Still defiant," she said. "Even before a queen." "Especially before a queen," he replied, and the silence between them felt warm instead of cold. But before she could speak again, the doors to the hall burst open. A wave of energy filled the room, and a dozen royal guards stormed in, their armor black, their eyes burning with betrayal. Behind them walked Lord Vareth, the High Advisor, his voice sharp as a blade. "In the name of the council," he declared, "you are relieved of Kama, and Serelith, your reign ends tonight." The Empress stood, her cloak flowing like a storm of light. "You dare bring treason into my hall?" Vareth smiled coldly. "You brought it yourself when you chose a human over your own kind." Ethan stepped forward, his hand on his blaster, but Serelith raised a hand. "No, this is my battle." Power flared around her, silver and gold swirling like flames. The hall shook as she descended the steps, her eyes glowing like twin suns. "I gave you peace," she said, her voice echoing. "I gave you a future, and you repay me with fear." Vareth laughed. "You gave us shame, you bowed to a lesser creature." Before he could finish, a blast of energy threw him back, his armor shattered, his body crashed against the wall. The guards opened fire, the air filled with bolts of plasma. Ethan grabbed a fallen weapon and fired beside her, covering her flank. 2 soldiers fell, the rest hesitated, fear in their eyes, because they weren't just fighting a queen, they were fighting their god. The battle inside the hall was short but furious. Light and fire clashed, the floor cracked, and at last, silence returned. Vareth lay defeated, and the guards fled into the darkness. Serelith stood breathing hard, her eyes bright with anger and pain. Ethan rushed to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "They will never stop, Ethan. They will hunt you because you changed me, and they will hunt me because I let you." He met her eyes. "Then run with me," he said. "We'll find a place beyond their reach, a world where crowns don't matter." Her expression softened, the fire in her eyes turning to light. "Run?" she whispered. "I have never run from anything in my life." "Maybe it's time to learn," he said, smiling. She looked at him for a long moment, then laughed softly, a sound so gentle that the palace itself seemed to breathe again. "You are mad, human," she said. "Maybe," he replied. "But you smiled." Her eyes met his, and the distance between a ruler and a rebel vanished for a moment. They were just 2 souls standing under the same stars. Then she spoke, her voice steady, her decision made. "I will not run, but I will not bow. If they want a war for my heart, they shall have it." She turned toward the window, the stars shining across her face, and whispered, "Tomorrow the galaxy will know my choice." When dawn came, the news spread like lightning. The Empress has named a human as guardian of the throne. The council collapsed in rage, armies rose, planets chose sides, and for the first time in history, the galaxy was divided by love, not power, and in the quiet of the palace, as ships mobilized and shadows grew, the Empress stood with Ethan by her side, hand in hand. "The world will burn for this," he said. Then let it burn, she whispered, so we can build something real from its ashes. Outside, the galaxy prepared for the final storm, and the legend of the human who taught a goddess to feel was just beginning. The galaxy was burning again, but this time it was not a war between empires. It was a war between belief and change, between those who wanted the old order and those who dared to dream of something new. The name of the human, Ethan Cole, now carried across every star system, whispered in fear by some and in hope by others, and at the center of it all stood Empress Sarilith, her silver throne cracked, her crown dimmed, yet her spirit brighter than ever. The council had declared her a traitor, fleets were sent to seize the palace, and millions of loyal soldiers prepared to defend her. The Zurian capital became the heart of a coming storm, and above it all, the royal ship Seraph's light floated like a wounded sun, its shields flickering as enemy fleets approached from every direction. Inside the command deck, alarms screamed, officers shouted. Energy lines flared red, but the Empress stood calm, her long cloak flowing like fire. Beside her, Ethan adjusted his armor, scarred from a dozen battles, his eyes steady, his voice quiet. They're coming in faster than expected, she nodded. They come for me. He turned toward her. No, he said. They come for what you've become. She looked at him, her gaze softening for just a moment. And what have I become, Captain? He smiled faintly. Human. Outside, the first wave of enemy ships descended. Plasma storms painted the skies crimson. Explosions echoed across the heavens, and the palace shields began to crack. The royal guards fell one by one, the corridors filled with smoke and light, and through it all, the Empress refused to retreat, her power flaring like the heart of a dying star. Ethan ran to her side, pulling her behind a column as a blast tore through the wall. You can't stay here, he shouted. If you die, everything ends. She shook her head. If I run, everything dies. The floor shook, the sound of battle growing louder. Then suddenly the doors of the great hall shattered, and Lord Vareth, the traitor who had once served her, entered in black armor, his voice cold as space. The age of mercy is over, he said, raising his blade. The galaxy will remember the Empress as a fool who fell for a human lie. Ethan stepped forward, his weapon ready. Then the galaxy will remember the human who stopped you. Vareth laughed. You are a shadow human, nothing compared to me. Ethan fired first, the blast striking Vareth's armor, sparks flying. They clashed amid the chaos, their fight echoing through the throne hall, light against darkness, will against power. The Empress watched, her hands trembling, wanting to intervene but knowing this was his battle, his moment. Vareth struck hard, sending Ethan crashing against the wall, his armor cracked, his breath shallow. You fight for a queen who no longer belongs to this world, the traitor hissed. Ethan smiled weakly, blood on his lips. Maybe that's why she deserves to rule it. He lunged again, slamming his weapon into Vareth's chest. Both of them fell, fire consuming the floor, and for a second the hall fell silent except for the hum of dying machines. The Empress ran to Ethan's side, kneeling beside him, her eyes wide, her power flickering. Ethan, she whispered, don't you dare. He looked up at her, his voice soft. You said a ruler who hides cannot lead. Her tears fell, glowing like liquid silver. And you said humans fight so the enemy remembers them. He smiled faintly, his hand trembling as it touched hers. Then promise me, Sarilith. Make them remember. She shook her head. No, you will live. I can heal you. But he whispered, you already did. And as his eyes closed, the light of the throne dimmed, the room filled with silence, but only for a moment, because when the Empress rose again, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Her power erupted, silver fire flooding the skies, every ship in orbit felt it. Every soldier fell to their knees as her voice echoed through the stars. You called mercy weakness, but today mercy becomes vengeance. You called love a flaw, but love will end your empires. She lifted her hand, and light swept across the heavens. The enemy fleets disintegrated, their energy melting into starlight. The entire armada burned away in a storm awe. Of grace and fury, when it was over, the capital floated in silence. The war ended in a single heartbeat, and across the galaxy, the stars shimmered brighter. Days later, when the fires were gone, the Empress stood alone in the stellar garden, her crown placed upon the ground, the wind carrying the scent of alien flowers. She whispered softly, "You defied me once, Ethan Cole, and in doing so, you saved me." She looked to the heavens, where a new constellation had appeared, a cluster of stars shaped like a rising flame. She smiled faintly. "They will call you myth, but I will call you mine." From that day onward, the galaxy changed. The Zyrian Empire no longer ruled through fear, but through unity. The humans of Earth became its closest allies, and the Empress's smile became the symbol of peace across the stars, and somewhere in the endless night, as starlight touched her face, she swore she could still hear his voice, whispering through the cosmos, "Never bow, not even to eternity." She closed her eyes, whispering back, "Then I will not, my chosen one." And thus ended the legend of the human who spoke against the crown, the man who taught a queen to feel, and the love that made even the stars remember humanity.